It's my desire this evening just to tell you straight up right now, I want you to die. Awkward, right? I want you to die to yourself. I want to die to myself. I want to sacrifice some things tonight. But I hope before we end that you'll find that in your death, in my death, in our submission, in our sacrifice, in our obedience to God, we start to find life. But what is it in your life that has to die so that you can begin to live? And what Jesus is telling us and what he was telling his disciples in that moment is that the only way for life to come through the Messiah, through the King, was if he was willing to walk through death. And Jesus is kind of giving us a hint on, in this Christian life that we're living, is the only way for us to get life, real life, life that has meaning and purpose, means we have to die too. And when Jesus talks about his death, it's kind of sucks to hear, and we learn about it in church and we hear about the cross and it's bad, but then he turns to his disciples, the people of God, us as the church. And he says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life, isn't that what we all want to do? Save our life? I want to save mine. He says, but whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. Life in Christ is the biggest blessing you can ever get. Don't be living in obedience so that you can get stuff. You're missing the point if that's the case. Living a life of sacrifice teaches us that we're worshiping God when we do that. So let's get really personal right now. What's God asking you to do to obey him? And what's at stake if you don't obey him? Going back to that thought of obedience might not just be for me, it might be for someone else. What's at stake if you don't obey? What was at stake if Jesus didn't obey? My life, your life. What was at stake if Paul didn't obey? 2/3 of the New Testament. What's at stake if Pastor Phil didn't open up this place, The Vine, on Sunday nights for us to have a safe place to own our faith? And more personally, what's at stake in our lives, in our relationships, in our city, in our church, in our world, if we don't begin to start obeying Christ through the life of sacrifice we're living right now? What he's saying is the very mission of your life should be living a life of sacrifice. And when we begin to sacrifice our lives, we begin to worship God. And you know what happens as we start to worship God? It's not moral living. It's becoming more like Christ.